Walking, in my opinion, is one of life's great pleasures. When we walk, we not only use our bodies in a healthy, enjoyable way, but also have time to observe both our own thoughts and the details of our surroundings in a way that is hardly possible if we are driving a car at 40 miles an hour rather than walking at 3 miles an hour. Nowadays in the United States, however, walking is very much under threat from our car-centered culture. There was in fact a sort of golden age of walking that began in the late 18th century and reached a peak around the turn of the 20th century, when walking was a common recreation, walking clubs were flourishing, and North Americans and Europeans were as likely to make a date for a walk as for a drink or a meal. By that time the 19th century introduction of sidewalks and the creation of green city parks, such as New York Central Park, which was completed in 1873, had made cities good places to walk. In addition, rural development such as national parks were in first bloom. Perhaps 1970, when the U.S. Census showed that the majority of Americans were for the first time in the history of any nation, suburban, marks the end of this golden age. Suburbanization has radically changed the nature of everyday life, and ordinary Americans now perceive, value, and use time, space, and their own bodies in very different ways than they did before. Walking still covers the short distances between parking lots and buildings, but walking as a cultural activity, as a pleasure, as travel, as a way of getting around, is fading. American suburbs are built to be traveled around in by car. People are no longer expected to walk, and they seldom do. There are many reasons for this. Suburbs generally are not exciting places to walk, and the experience of moving through them can become very dull indeed at 3 miles an hour instead of 40 or 60. Moreover, many suburbs were designed with curving streets that vastly expand distances. Sometimes, in order to reach a destination only a quarter of a mile away, the traveler must walk or drive more than a mile. Also, although suburbs are generally safe, since walking is not an ordinary activity, a lone walker may feel ill at ease about doing something unexpected and unusual. Walking is thus an ineffective means of transportation in the suburbs, but the suburbanization of the American mind has made walking increasingly rare even in places where it is a good way of getting around. San Francisco, where I live, is very much that kind of walking city, yet even there people routinely drive distances that could be covered more quickly on foot. For example, once I made my friend Maria, who is a surfer, an athlete, and a world traveler, walk for about 10 minutes from her house to a restaurant on 16th Street, and she was surprised and pleased to realize how close it was, for it had never occurred to her before that it was accessible on foot. People have a clear sense of how far they are willing to walk. Urban planners generally suppose that it is around a quarter of a mile, the distance that can be walked in about 5 minutes. But in fact it seems to have shrunk until now it is no more than the 50 yards or so from car to building.